Hey, and welcome back to Principal's Office Hong Kong, where we flip education on its head, literally sometimes, but mostly just for the vibes. I'm Louis Mack, your guide on this educational roller coaster, and today we're diving into the American makeover of Filipino education. This episode's part of our ongoing series where we explore how colonial powers turn classrooms into tools for control, assimilation, and every now and then, actual progress. We've already tackled the Spanish in Venezuela turning out loyal Catholics who, leaving most folks illiterate. The French turning Senegal into proving ground for civilizing missions, and the Dutch handpicking an elite in Indonesia to keep their spice empire humming along. Now, it's the Philippines' turn under the American spotlight. A tale of mass education, cultural upheaval, and so much English it'd make Shakespeare blush. Why does this matter? Because education's never just about ABCs. It's about power, identity, and who gets to call the shots. This series peels back those messy layers, and the Philippines offers a wild twist. What happens when a colonizer goes all in on schools for everyone? Spoiler alert, it's a double-edged sword, sharp enough to cut through literacy. Illiteracy, in this case, but heavy with baggage. But before we dive deep, let's catch up on some education news. With the recent cuts to the education department in the US, even the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the only nationally comparable test given periodically to US students, will shrink in scope over the next 8 years. Less subjects, less grades. Nice! Kids won't be taking assessments every year now, and guess what? Management can pick and choose. Woohoo! Well, anyway, back to the topic, the Philippines and how the US affected their education. So grab your milk tea, extra boba, and let's dive into this colonial remix, American style. Spanish rule education as spiritual conquest, 1565 to 1898. So for 333 years, the Spanish ruled the Philippines with two weapons of mass destruction and submission, the sword and the cross. When it came to education, it was less about teaching minds and more about breaking spirits. Think of friar-run schools as Bible boot camps, 80% prayer and 20% arithmetic. History lessons? Nope, the only revolutions in their textbooks was Jesus flipping tables. Ask about Lapu-Lapu, a Filipino island chief, and you'd be told he was just some angry fishmonger. By the 1800s, historian John Schumacher estimates only 3 to 5% of Filipinos were literate. Compare that to Japan under the Tokugawa shogunate, where 60% could read and write. Why the gap? Spain's colonial strategy was simple. If you can't read, you can't rebel. They saw what happened in Latin America. Educated mestizos like Simón Bolívar and José de San Martín were writing manifestos and toppling empires. Spain wasn't about to let that happen in Manila. But there was a loophole. The ilustrados, the elite few who got European education. Rizal mastered Spanish so well, he wrote novels that made friars cry into their cassocks. Marcelo del Pilar's satirical essays mocked the clergy into existential crisis. Spain's own schools created the revolutionaries who would eventually overthrow them. Classic colonial backfire. Imagine being in a classroom where the main focus is religious instruction. The friars taught salvation over education, creating a society where allegiance to the church was paramount. It's easy to see how this stifled education growth and kept the population subservient. That is the best. We need subservient people. American colonialism. Fast forward to 1898, and the Philippines has been shimmering under the Spanish rule since 1565. Over 300 years of friars, fiestas, and not a whole lot of reading. Schools run by the church were heavy on prayers, but light on pencils. Historian Teodoro Agoncillo pegs literacy at a measly 20% couldn't spell revolution, even as they were plotting one. Sounds familiar? It's a dead ringer for Venezuela under the Spanish, where schools were all about loyalty to king and God, leaving literacy stuck at 10%. Then, boom, 1898 rolls in and the Spanish-American War flips the scripts. December 10th, the U.S. buys the Philippines for $20 million in the Treaty of Paris. President McKinley calls it benevolent assimilation. Fancy way of saying, we're your new bosses now, but with a smile. Unlike the Spanish in Venezuela or the French in Senegal who kept the education on a tight leash, the Americans go big. By 1901, Act Number 74 launches a public education system, free, secular, and for all. English becomes the golden ticket, free textbooks flood in, and over 1,000 schools spurred by 1902. The Americans believed education was a tool to civilize and modernize Filipino society, creating a new generation loyal to American ideals. But this wasn't just benevolence, it was strategic. By educating the masses, the U.S. could build a population easier to govern and more aligned with their interests. Consider the impact of this sudden shift. For the first time, education was accessible to more than just the elite. This democratization was revolutionary, opening doors and creating opportunities previously unimaginable. However, it also meant a rapid imposition of American cultural values, often at the expenses of Filipino traditions and languages. Thomasites and Pensionados, the American Dream Team. New schools need teachers, right? So enter the Thomasites. 1,074 Americans sailing in on the USS Thomas in 1901, fanning out to 34 provinces like educational Avengers. Picture Mary H. Fee in Capiz, teaching kids who's never seen a chalkboard, or Walter Marquardt lugging sewing machines to Ifugao to stitch some modernity into the mountains. By 1907, they trained 4,000 Filipino teachers for the Bureau of Education. It's a total pivot from Venezuela, where Spanish friars stuck to scriptures. No baseball teams or glee clubs there. The Thomasites were young, idealistic, and often unprepared for the realities of teaching in the Philippines. They faced language barriers, cultural differences, and logistical challenges. Yet their impact was profound. They introduced new teaching methods, extracurricular activities, and a spirit of modernity. That was infectious. Then there's the Pensionado Program, kicking off in 1903. Out of the 20,000 applicants, 100 lucky Filipinos ship off to Harvard, Cornell, Berkeley. Big names for big dreams. Jose Abad Santos becomes Chief Justice. Carlos P. Romulo snags a Pulitzer. It's got echoes of Indonesia's Dutch-educated Sukarno or Senegal's French-trained elite. But the scale's massive here. Still, not everyone's cheering. Casilo Ocias in 1938 calls it colonizing the Filipino mind, at least dressed up as a scholarship. Another program was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it offered world-class education and the chance to bring back new ideas. On the other, it created a class of Filipinos deeply Americanized, often seen as out of touch with their own culture. And this tension between adopting American ideals and maintaining Filipino identity is a theme that continues to resonate. Citizenship and the colonial catch. A complicated relationship. While the Americans were busy building schools and teaching English, there was another layer to the colonial relationship. When the U.S. took over in 1898, they classified Filipinos as U.S. nationals, not full citizens. What's the difference? Nationals could travel to the U.S. and work there without a visa, but they couldn't vote, hold public office, or get full citizenship perks. It was like being invited to a party but not being allowed to dance or, vote for the DJ. Woohoo! For most Filipinos, a path to citizenship was about as clear as a foggy morning in Manila. The Nationality Act of 1940 opened a legal door for naturalization, but it was narrow and tricky to navigate. Then came the Tydings-McDuffie Act of 1934, which was supposed to pave the way for Philippine independence in 1946. Sounds great, right? Plot twist! It also reclassified Filipinos as aliens for immigration purposes and slapped a quota of just 50 Filipinos per year allowed to enter the U.S. Suddenly, it was harder than ever to even dream of citizenship. This murky citizenship status had significant implications for education. It dangled the promise of upward mobility through learning, yet kept the ultimate price, full citizenship, out of reach for most. While education was a ladder, it often led to a ceiling of limited opportunities, fostering a sense of frustration and disillusionment among many Filipinos. Impacts on education: the good, the bad, and the colonial. Let's break down the impacts, because this is where the rubber meets the road. By 1939, literacy skyrockets to 48.2 from 20%. Per Agoncillo, over 1 million kids are in school by 1920, with 27,000 teachers by 1935. The University of Philippines, born in 1908, ranks globally today. Try finding that in Venezuela's Spanish leftovers, stuck at 10% literacy rate, or Senegal's tiny French-educated clique. But hold up. Here's the deep dive into the downside. Number 1, linguistic chaos. The push for English-only instruction created chaos in the classroom. The 1925 Monroe survey revealed that only 26% of fifth graders could read English at grade level. Dropout rates hit a staggering 65% by 1939, largely because many kids couldn't hack complex subjects presented in a foreign tongue. Imagine trying to learn chemistry while still humming the tune of Bahay Kubo. It's a linguistic train wreck. Once again, this is not a problem in itself. Education can be bilingual or even trilingual. I'm sure of this. But one needs to build a solid language foundation so that kids can do anything significant with it. You cannot solve for x in algebra when you don't even understand what x is. Now, here is an update. English in the Philippines is pretty natural to come by. It's not considered a foreign tongue anymore, as it is an official language. In addition, dropout rates are currently sitting at only 6.81%. This change is significant. Thus, they have come a long way. That being said, it still is an issue that a language was imposed on them through colonialism just because it is now an official language and that they don't feel it's foreign. It doesn't mean they were not colonizing the Filipino mind. Number 2, cultural alienation. The curriculum was peak American fan fiction. Textbooks gushed about the U.S. as the land of the free, the American dream where the Filipino history and culture got a shrug. Students staged Thanksgiving plays and swung baseball bats, adorable but irrelevant to their realities. A 1910 textbook barely nods to Lapu-Lapu, who took down Magellan, the Portuguese explorer that wanted to circumnavigate the earth under Spanish order so that land could be colonized. This educational approach led to a sense of cultural inferiority, as Filipino students were taught that heritage was less valuable than American ideals. Number 3, socio-economic gaps. Access boomed, but quality lagged. The 1925 Monroe Commission found urban schools flush with cash, while rural ones had dirt floors and no books. A 1930s study pegs rural dropout rates at 70% in non-English zones. By 2015, urban kids outscore rural kids by 30% on tests, per the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. It's Indonesia's Dutch system redux, favoring cities or Senegal's four communes focus. The system pumped out clerks for American firms, sugar, tobacco, not leaders for Filipino needs. Pensionados often stayed stateside, echoing Senegal's brain drain to France. Number 4, irrelevant curriculum. Lessons were ripped from America. Hygiene tips for snow didn't fit tropical barrios. A 1905 photo shows Moro girls in Zamboanga sewing aprons. Cute, but alien. Vocational schools pushed export farming, not local needs. Per a 1930 Bureau of Education report, In Venezuela, the Spanish ignored practical skills entirely. Here, it's education for America's agenda, not Manila's. Indonesia's Dutch taught plantation management for profit. Same game, different team. 5. Psychological toll. Constantino says it bred inferiority. Filipinos taught their culture was lesser. A 1939 survey found 40% of students felt backwards next to Americans. It survived Senegal's French-educated felt or Indonesia's Dutch-schooled elite. But mass scale here. That weight lingers. English fluency still outranks Filipino pride. Modern influences. Echoes of Uncle Sam. Fast forward to now, and the American stamp's still loud. The K-12 Overhaul Republic Act number 10533, signed May 15, 2013, mirrors the U.S. 13-year model. A 2018 World Bank report says high school completion jumped 15% by 2020. English dominates. 95% of public schools use it per 2020. And the Philippines ranked 22nd of 111 in the 2023 EF English Proficiency Index. Senegal's French fluency gave them a similar edge. Indonesia's Dutch legacy faded, leaving English king. But it's not all smooth sailing. A 2023 Philippine Institute for Development Studies report flags 5,000 schools without power, 10,000 schools needing water, 91% short on classrooms. Pandemic stats from 2021 DepEd show only 64% of kids had smartphones for online learning, which, in my opinion, is actually amazing because I don't want my kid with a smartphone until he's 18. Why are we complaining about kids not having smartphones? I need to send my kid to the Philippines. The Philippine government has launched several initiatives to address outstanding issues like poverty, access, and quality in education. Some key efforts include the Pantawid Pimalayang Filipino Program, 4Ps, a cash transfer initiative supporting education-related expenses for poor families. The Sustainable Livelihood Program, SLP, provides opportunities, indirectly supporting education by easing financial pressures. The K-12 reform aims to produce graduates better prepared for higher education or the workforce, while the alternative learning system offers a flexible way for out-of-school youth and adults to complete basic education. So these initiatives reflect a multi-pronged approach to improving education, tackling both immediate needs and long-term goals. The legacy of American influence in Philippine education is complex, with both positive advancements and ongoing challenges. As we navigate this landscape, it's crucial to recognize the historical context while also striving for a future where education is truly empowering for all Filipinos. One more thing to note is that the Spanish came in causing havoc to the education system, so it wasn't all about the Americans. If anything, when comparing and contrasting the different powers, one can tell clearly that the Americans were quite benevolent in comparison to the Spanish. I'm not saying they are right, but just better. So, in conclusion, tying it all together, from Senegal's French elite to Indonesia's Dutch loyalists, Venezuela's Spanish Catholics, and the Philippines' Americanized masses, colonial education was a power play, a progress maker, and a hot mess. The Spanish in Venezuela left limited literacy and deep faith. The French in Senegal built a tiny assimilated class. The Dutch in Indonesia educated a few to run their empire. And finally, the Americans in the Philippines went all out on mass education, but sparked a cultural tug-of-war. In the Philippines, the American system boosted literacy and global skills, but left scars: linguistic chaos, cultural disconnect, inequality. It's a reminder that education's not neutral. It's a tool, and who's holding it matters. So, as you slurp the last boba, think about how education shapes your world, past echoes, or future dreams. Thanks for tuning in. This is Principal's Office, Hong Kong. Stay cool, stay curious, and remember to flip the world upside down. See ya!